Hey, what's up and how's it going, everyone? Well, I'm so glad that you have took your time to spend with me right here today on the MRB Wrestling Review Show. I'm your co-host, Mike McRock Wilson, and last night was TNA Impact Wrestling from Cincinnati, Ohio, and the show kicked off when Bully Ray came out, along with his members of the Aces and Eights, Knox and Bischoff, and basically he cut a promo and about how we rused everyone last week when we all thought that Aces and Eights were going to implode. And I really like when he, got close to the ring. You see him celebrate with Taz and then got into the face with Mike TNA and just basically told him in his face, I fooled you. And he got on the microphone and he basically said the same thing to everyone. And then out came Mr. Anderson and also cut a promo as well. He accepts the challenge to Bully Ray for next week. And they're really building up to the hype, and it's done really well because next week those two will face each other in a no disqualification match, and there's going to be stipulations added. Mr. Anderson said that if I win, Aces and Eights will have to disband. No ifs, ands, or about it. And if Anderson loses, well then, it's a different story because he will leave TNA. And I think that those stipulations added to this no disqualification match are going to play out pretty well, I think. I have an idea what the outcome is going to be. And with that being said, during that promo, we saw Anderson mention his wife who's pregnant with twins. And he says if he will lose the match, he will go home and be a daddy. And I found an interesting little throwaway logic in that promo. And it's that, Anderson is a wrestler who is touring the world with TNA, and to support his wife and his future kids you have to work. And I think that logic was kind of thrown out the window only a bit, but I do understand Mr. Anderson wanting to be a dad and go home with his kids. I can understand that, even though I really don't. I'm not a father, but I do understand it if I were in his shoes. So, it's a little 50-50 plot hole split down the middle. But with that being said, I really enjoyed that first segment. I thought it was really good. And when usually Bully Ray turns, lines to what other people say and make them look personal as well. When, after Anderson mentioned about his wife being pregnant with twins, Bully Ray came back and said, I will pile drive your wife, and the fans just took the booze to Bully Ray. He got very personal, and only on TNA you can get away with saying stuff like that on the show. You won't see any of those lines Bully Ray usually says in the WWE. There would be lawsuits galore if he was on WWE saying stuff like he did on TNA, mentioning about Anderson's wife, getting very personal and taking the heat. And Bully Ray does that so well, and he never fails in his promos, and really just taking the booze from the audience. And his other job is to put over the guy that he's going to face, and I think he's doing that tremendously as well. The fans are behind Anderson 100%, and I'm really looking forward to this match next week at Turning Point. And throughout the show, we saw a little bit more of Anderson and Aces and Eights and Bully Ray as well. We saw Anderson attack Bischoff backstage, handcuff him, and told him a little buddy story. We never got to see that. That was off camera. And after that, he dragged his carcass up to the stage, and they gave him a pile driver. It was, shades of what Bully Ray did to Anderson a couple of months ago when he pile drived Anderson on the stage. So the build up to this match is also tremendous as well. The hype is there, the build up is there. Like I said, I'm looking forward to this match. Moving on. After that promo that kicked off the show, Anderson challenged a member to an Aces and Eights. He challenged Knox. It was an impromptu match. And basically that was a match where the other guy dominates and the other guy gets the momentum shift, so to speak. Knox really dominated that match throughout. It was a not half bad so-so match. And what I really like is that we see these trends that things come out of nowhere. We see it in the WWE, NXT, and now TNA. And it's not just in character turns, heel turns, and face turns. It's also within the matches as well, where moves just come out of nowhere. And I actually enjoy that. So with that being said, I like how Knox was dominating, Anderson laid the mic check out of nowhere, and gained the pinfall victory. And usually when someone has momentum going into a match, the other guy gets the win. And I think that Anderson is going to break that barrier because I don't see Anderson leaving TNA anytime soon. I see Anderson going over Bully Ray next week for the Aces and Eights to disband because that's been dragging out for a few weeks too long. Also on the show, we saw Christopher Daniels face Joseph Park, and I thought it was a decent, entertaining match. And what I really liked were the video packages, the interviews that we saw backstage from Daniels and Joseph Park. I think Joseph Park being really serious doesn't really come off very well because it's almost laughable and not in a good way. So I think he needs to work on not being too serious, just be serious enough in his promos. So I thought he was, overacting in that sense. And but what I did like in that match was that Joseph Park's rage cost him the match because what happened was he shoved the ref out of the way for Christopher Daniels to get the low blow. Not a clean victory for Daniels, and I actually don't mind Daniels winning because usually Daniels and Kaz are on the receiving end of a lot of things that they look good in. So it's nice to see Christopher Daniels actually getting a win. And then after that, we saw Abyss coming out before the main event. Not Abyss, Joseph Park. Well, yeah, you get what I mean, right? And basically he was talking about how Christopher Daniels cheated to win in that match. And also mentioned the fact that when we don't see Abyss, we see Joseph Park. And when we see Joseph Park, we don't see Abyss. As a result, Joseph Park issues an open challenge to Abyss. Basically, he's really kayfabing everyone who's watching in the audience and at home. Issuing an open challenge to himself. I'm not really looking forward to this next week. I'm just going to leave it at that. But I think the good thing that's going to come out of it is that there's going to be shenanigans on the show to break up the main event matches that are going to happen next week, which I will get to later on this review. Also on the show, we saw EC3 and facing the tag team of Norvera and Dewey Barnes, and basically he's now become the Ryback, where he faces basically he's become the Ryback of TNA, facing jobbers one-on-one and now in handicap matches. And I think that needs to stop. I don't think that TNA should copy what WWE does and vice versa. Anything goes. Leave the shows separate as they are. So with that being said, not a good day for EC3, I might add, because I thought that Nor Vera and Dewey Barnes were the team that got over with the fans, and they're actually doing not half bad for jobbers. I thought, throughout that match, we saw good frequent tags from Dewey Barnes and Nor Vera. I thought that was pretty good, and gaining some, applying some moves throughout that match, the crossbodies, the high crossbodies off the top rope, the hurricanranas, the top rope drop kicks from Nor Vera and Dewey Barnes. I thought those moments were pretty good, and ultimately it resulted in EC3 nailing the 1%er on both guys and pinning them both at the same time. I thought that was a nice touch, because it shows EC Carter 3 should move on from these two guys. But let's be real. On the internet and in the audience, Nor Vera and Dewey Barnes are actually, going over with those kind of people. So with that being said, please just put them as tag team champions, and make those titles mean something, at least, I think, in my opinion. Also on the show, we saw Dixie Carter come out, and basically the reason why she came out is that she wasn't reacting very well. She was upset over the fact that with AJ Styles promos were being used on the show, and she don't want AJ Styles to be associated with TNA. And to add to that is that I would like to see AJ Styles more touring the world and promoting TNA and defending the championship. I could see him go places like Canada, Europe, Asia, Australia, everywhere around the world to promote the show and to be put in championship matches. And I like to see more of that on the show, more of those kind of promos where DC Carter just gets even more upset over it. More of that, please, on TNA. And I thought throughout that segment where Dixie Carter was there, she really needs to work on her acting. It really didn't improve at all. And she had all the four guys that are going to face each other one-on-one next week in the tournament matches to crown a new champion. And I thought that segment itself just had a lot going on, and even though the main focus was on the tournament matches, it just felt like there was too much going on in that segment. What happened was that in that promo where Dixie Carter cut before she introduced all four guys that will be in this matches next week, there was a moment where Dixie Carter talked about that match that happened last week between Jeff Hardy and the other guy, and she didn't even mention Chris Sabin's name, and basically what she did was bury Chris Sabin. I thought that was very unexcusable. Chris Sabin is an underrated guy. He's one of the greatest wrestlers, and he's a champion. He's an X Division champion, and Dixie Carter just buried a champion on her show. I thought that was ridiculous on the part of Dixie Carter, and I think a lot of fans really didn't like Dixie Carter burying Chris Sabin, especially the smart fans as well. And when she introduced all four guys, we saw Bobby Roode, James Storm, Samoa Joe, and Magnus. Magnus cut a promo, Joe cut a promo, and so did Bobby Roode and James Storm to hype up their matches next week. James Storm hyping up the crowd for next week's match against Bobby Roode. And I like when he was about to say his catchphrase, Bobby Roode kind of stole it without talking on the microphone, and then James Storm just came back and really bounced back with Bobby Roode. with the story about your damn luck, that was tremendous. And I think really ultimately the only thing that saved that segment was when Samoa Joe got on the microphone and basically told Dixie Carter is that you are using all of us 8 guys to get a new champion on your show. It's going to be Dixie's champion instead of TNA's champion, and this is all about Dixie Carter not signing a deal with AJ Styles. And Samoa Joe just delivered that promo really, really great, I thought. He really, truly spoke his mind, and that was, like I said, the only thing that saved that segment on the show. It was the segment that was on the hour. It was right in the middle. It really felt really flat when Dixie Carter's horrible acting. And like I said, the only thing that saved it was Samoa Joe. Also on TNA, we saw Gail Kim issue an open challenge to anyone outside the company. And the challenge was accepted to Hannah Blossom. If you don't know her, she was on boot camp. It's kind of basically a gut check, only it's a British boot camp that was on Britain. You know, and Rockstar Spud was the guy that won that British boot camp. So I like how, you know, they used a diva that was basically on the show months before. And so we kind of, as the audience, kind of knew who she was. So I like that. It wasn't someone from Ring of Honor or WWE. It was someone that we already see on TNA. And I thought that was a smart move on the part of TNA. And with that being said, the match itself was okay. Nothing out of the ordinary really happened. Gail Kim was the dominant throughout that match. And even though Hannah got a few licks in, there was no big moment for Hannah Blossom in that match, and the audience never really didn't react well throughout that match. It was like we were hearing crickets. Yeah. So basically, really all that was Gail Kim showing the audience who she is. She's the dominant, most greatest Knockouts champion in the history of TNA, and with Lady Tapa on her side, really, who can beat her? So I like to see more of this build up of these open challenges where someone eventually down the road, weeks to come, will eventually catch Gail Kim off guard and probably get a championship match against Gail Kim. I can see this open challenge week after week, building it up more and more, slowly, bit by bit, and will just work out perfectly. And basically what Gail Kim is doing is putting over divas without putting them over, if that makes any sense. Also, it was the main event, the submission match, Austin Aries versus Kurt Angle. I thought this was actually a really good match, and it seems to have a lot of hype. The match had a lot of hype going in, and it didn't disappoint. Those two, Austin Aries and Kurt Angle, put on a clinic. It was a great wrestling match, great submission match as well. I love how these submissions were utilized. There wasn't much of it. There was the moment in the beginning where there was some Boston Crabs and other submission moves and the like the STF, and trying to apply the last chancery in the beginning, and then followed by some grappling moves in the middle, and then right at the end, the submission for the win. Kurt Angle goes over Austin Aries and advances. I also like how he won as well. I like that there was no interference, outside interference, and that made the match worth watching. And I was kind of skeptic when Bobby Roode came out that he was going to interrupt, and I liked that he didn't. And that was a smart move on the part of TNA's booking. Really all that was Kurt Angle really sticking into Bobby Roode and used his own finisher, the crossface, to get the win over Austin Aries. And basically they're using this tournament to build up the match between Bobby Roode and Kurt Angle once again, probably for the finals or the semifinals with the way the brackets are. I do believe Jeff Hardy is facing the winner of Bobby Roode and James Storm. I think it will be Bobby Roode. Bobby Roode advances. Don't matter with the Samoa Joe or Magnus match, because ultimately the winner of that will face Kurt Angle, and Kurt Angle will go over one of them. Bobby Roode, Kurt Angle. That's the match they're building up in this tournament, and I like how they're doing it. And whoever wins that match will ultimately face AJ Styles when he comes back, when they stare down with him. And like I said, the show ended off with the pile driver, and everything is working out great. I'm looking forward to next week's show. We got the main event, Mr. Anderson versus Bully Ray, no disqualification. It is club versus career. The bull rope match between James Storm and Bobby Roode and Kurt Angle. And Samoa Joe versus Magnus in the Falls Count Anywhere match. And if I were to predict the placings of these matches, is that the match on the top of the hour when the show starts, it will be a tournament match. Right in the middle is going to be the other tournament match. And the final match will be the no disqualification match. That is what I predict. What do you think? What the outcomes will be going into Turning Point next week? Comment below and let me know. And to all your MRBers watching this review of TNA Impact Wrestling, get plenty of rest. And always do your best.